What is up? Welcome to this edition of MTGA Tasting Notes. We're getting into the real good stuff in this particular session. This is the almighty Single Barrel Merlot, St. Helena Single Barrel we call it. This came from really my love of whiskey. That's how we came up with the single barrel idea. Now, for those of you that are into great bourbons, scotches, things of that nature, every once in a while you see that single barrel designation on it. And for me, in my mind, I went to, that's an artist capturing exactly what they want. They're like, here's this one lot, this one barrel out of the dozens or thousands that we have. And we want to bottle this one up on its own because it is just that good. So back in 2013, that's what we did. We found a lot of Merlot in particular that was just singing. It was so incredibly good. So we purchased a specific new barrel for it. We kept it aside. We left it independent and away from the other Merlot lots so we didn't accidentally blend it all. And we bottled that up all on its own. And it was what started our St. Helena Single Barrel Merlot project. Now this is our 2016 vintage. It is, as a result, our fourth vintage that we've released. That's right, 13, 14, 15, 16. I can do math, I promise. So 16, as I've talked about a lot in some of our other videos, it was one, a very big, bold vintage. Number two, it was really this vintage where I felt like MTGA was kind of we were hitting our stride. It was kind of our new benchmark year, and we were really kind of figuring out where we wanted our wines to be, the techniques that we were using, the barrel program, everything really started, it was like all the gears were moving in the right way at the right speed and just going in the direction we wanted it to go. And the 16 single barrel is no different. Now, as the name implies, there are only about 24 cases that we make of this. So if you haven't had this particular wine before, if you're unfamiliar with it, be sure to keep an eye out for our release notices. I will say, as a shameless plug as well, that really the best way and generally the only way to get a hold of our single barrel Merlot is through our wine club. That is generally how it sells out within the first couple of days when we release it. And that's always in the fall. So if you are interested in this wine, the best way to check this out is going to be going to our website, mtgawines.com, and signing up for the wine club. You can just check the single barrel wait list and we'll make sure that you're in line to get this particular release. Now to get into the details. Because we take this Merlot and we separate it out, we want to make sure it's the most complex, most complete, and really the most intense lot of Merlot from that particular year. So in January, about 2 months after the fermentations have really slowed down, the secondary fermentation, the malolactic conversion is wrapping up or it's kind of well on its way, we go back through and we taste through all of our lots. And at that time, we start making kind of some preemptive decisions of what barrels, or what wines we want in what barrels are going to be a part of what programs, whether it's our Cabernet program, our Merlot program, what clones of Pinot are showing really well, what batch of Riesling we want to do in neutral oak versus stainless steel. We do a big old shakeup in January, really deciding kind of the future of that vintage and where we want it to be eventually. And as a part of that, I'll select a couple of barrels in some cases. Sometimes it's just one, maybe it's 2 or 3 of Merlot that are just head and shoulders above some of the others. It's more complex, more complete. The structure is more balanced. They just have that X factor really early on, and that's something that you want to try and capture. So those barrels get set aside, and within about the next year or so of aging, that's when they start to kind of separate. So let's say we have 2 barrels that are kind of in contention for the single barrel, which has happened in the past. At some point, one is going to kind of hang a left, another's going to hang a right. And one of those avenues is going to be a little bit better suited for bottling it up and just capturing that moment. And the other one actually becomes a really great blending component for our Napa Valley Merlot. So we do get to tag team this a little bit, and kind of create a couple wines at the same time, being super efficient in the cellar. But when we finally decide which barrel is going to be the single barrel, that's when we put it aside. We make sure that there's a big old do not touch piece of blue tape on it to make sure that we don't tap into it too much because it is just that one barrel. Now, once we've decided, these two barrels and which ones we're going to cut from the herd, they generally end up in a new French oak barrel as well. So you're going to get a lot more structure, a lot more intensity, and actually a lot more balance and just kind of breadth and depth to the wine as well, because of that kind of nice charred, toasty new barrel. And it'll sit in that new barrel for about 22 months, and we'll end up bottling it and then aging it for another year in barrel for this particular wine as well. And it's just something to extend that aging time, let all those characteristics really come together and show themselves in their best light when we do release it. Now, the characteristics themselves, you get that really nice toastiness right out of the gate. It's going to be those chocolatey, caramely, vanilla, some nutty characteristics in there from the barrel aging. And with the intensity of the new oak barrels, that totally makes sense. That's exactly what we're looking for. We want this to be a nice, big, kind of warming wine, you know, something that just has that kind of yumminess to it. But behind all those characteristics, even those are generally the most prominent, especially with this wine at a young age, you do get those nice, classic Merlot characteristics as well. The tannins are a little bit more elevated. It's a little bit more structured, a little bit denser, a little bit chewier kind of a wine. The finish is really, really long. It just kind of lingers and continues and goes and goes and goes. You definitely get a lot more of those oak characteristics and kind of that big fruit up front. It kind of hits you right away, and it's this nice little pop, and then it just cruises. It definitely reaches out, grabs you, and then it's just like, boom, I'm here, steady state, just all the way through. And which is exactly what we want from this. So you go from those nice kind of big, toasty, darker fruit characteristics, and you get a little bit more of those red fruits. You get a little bit more of those savory characteristics, and it just trails off. And it kind of leaves, like right now, it leaves like a little bit of like that vanilla, kind of nutty kind of characteristic going on, which is really, really just doesn't leave you hanging. You feel satisfied when you're drinking some single barrel, that's for sure. This is, I mean, for lack of a better word, our single barrel has become, you know, our, you know, quote unquote reserve project, especially with how small production it is. But an incredibly fun wine to make. To be able to take a vineyard like our Merlot vineyard that we source from and say, okay, how good can we make this wine? And just go for it. It's something that we love doing every single year, and it's something that I'm super, super proud to have into the lineup since 2013. And now with this fourth vintage, 2016, it is just like, yeah, hitting that stride. Warms my heart, it really does. As always, thank you guys for checking out the videos. Hope that you guys are enjoying them. As always, any questions, feel free to leave them. Give us a shout anytime. Be sure to hit subscribe, and we will see you next time. Cheers.